One person left. Your mom left.
What? Yeah, yeah. Did that feel better? Yeah, it was a long spot.
Maybe we shouldn't do the quiet one.
Whatever.
We do the gladiators.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, the gladiators are about to enter.
All right.
Huh?
Is it competitive, or do you just tell your story?
I think they tell it, and if they don't like you, they say piss off. Yeah. Shell? know if it was for her birthday, he isn't Darth Vader. Anakin Skywalker. He doesn't become Darth Vader until like later in life. He said it was about Darth Vader's fourth birthday. Well, if you're right, I hope you're right. I hope it's me, right? I just wish it was pretty dark.
Yeah, sorry about that.
It's really hard to remove the legend line. No, it's fine. Yeah, it's just this much piece. Yeah, I can't tell where the lines are.
Live from Jump in Boise, Idaho, it's Story Story Night, where featured storytellers and spontaneous story slammers get on stage and into their element, with true stories on a theme. This season, we are braving the elements with stories inspired by the periodic table. Tonight, breathe easy with our theme, Oxygen. It's gonna be a real gas. Live from Jump in Boise, Idaho, it's Story Story Night.
Welcome to
where
Story
featured
Story Night. I
storytellers
am
and
your host,
spontaneous
Jody
story
Eichelberger.
slammers get on stage
you.
and
Oh,
into their
thank you.
element with true stories on a theme.
This is where we tell true stories on a theme, live on stage, without notes. Tonight's theme is oxygen. And isn't it nice that we've started a new year? We can all just, it's a new beginning. We can all just breathe easy. Right? Yes. So the way, well, first, actually, we do need to recognize some of the people that make Story Story Night breathe easier, and those are our sponsors, so please help me in thanking our season sponsor, Pettit Group Real Estate. And tonight's show sponsor, Body Basics. Plus, we also want to thank these beautiful people right over here from the Boise Phil, the Woodwind String Quintet. They are actually partially responsible for the theme tonight. Because when we were outlining the season, we knew we would have this partnership with the Boise Philharmonic, and we knew we were doing elements, Brave the Elements, and so we were like, well, how do the musicians tie into the elements? Well, you know, it's a woodwind quintet. They need a lot of air. So let's do oxygen for that. The next one coming up next month will be copper plus zinc equals brass. That was the most accommodating we were for the musicians. Because brass, it's a brass quintet that's coming, but brass is not an element on the periodic table. So be thinking of your stories about copper and zinc. I know you have a lot of zinc stories. I'm really looking forward to that. Actually, Oxygen was the #1 submitted story that we've had for features applying to tell a story. And so I'm looking forward to a lot of great stories from slammers tonight, because apparently we all have some connection to oxygen. I'm not sure what that is, but we all have that connection. And actually, I have a short story that I was going to share during Carbon, but it is appropriate for oxygen because it's really about how Carbon was starving me of my oxygen. I moved to New York City twice. The first time I moved to New York, I had a job already. I had a week to move there because I had been cast in a Broadway show and the rehearsal started in a week. So I went there. My first night I had a couple of friends that I knew, and I stayed with her in an apartment in the Upper West Side. And that was a pretty great experience. I figured, well, this is how everyone in New York lives. I walked into her apartment, and there was a stack of Emmys on top of the piano, and those were hers. The apartment, however, was not hers. I found out actually she was subletting, and the person who actually owned the apartment was Greg German, who at the time wasn't using it because he was in LA filming Ally McBeal. You know, like everybody who lives in New York, that's how it is. The second time I moved to New York, I went back because I felt like my career had taken me away from New York prematurely, and I kind of wanted to go back and see what else might happen, ride it out a little longer. So the second time I moved to New York, I had no job lined up and no place to live. I had gone on Craigslist and sight unseen signed up for a 3-month sublet in Brooklyn, and the key arrived in the mail in Portland, where I was moving from. So I took my key, and the first night I was there, I opened the sublet, went inside, and there was an alarm going off. And I looked up, and it was like this alarm on the ceiling in the living room. So I figured, oh, the battery's low. I'll just pop the battery out and throw it on the table. So I kind of took the whole alarm off and took the battery out and set it on the table and didn't really think about it. And, you know, I was so full of ambition and drive and energy for this new venture in my life that the first thing I did was sit on the couch and cry. So that took some time. And that night, I was pretty emotional. And, you know, I didn't have a job yet, so I was conscious of money. There was an air conditioner in the apartment, but I didn't use it because I wanted to keep the electrical bill down. So I opened a bunch of windows. And in Portland and in Idaho, that is a very nice thing to do at night because you can breathe in some really nice fresh air. In New York, the night air is very much like the daytime air, only dark. So it didn't really cool things off. Plus, it's a one-bedroom apartment, so and the bedroom was quite small. So the real renters had built a loft bed in that room. So I was sleeping with about this much room above my nose, right up at the top of the ceiling. And I thought, okay, I'll get a good night's sleep. I'll wake up in the morning. I'll be recharged, ready to go, attack this big adventure. I woke up in the morning. I did not feel refreshed or recharged. I had a horrible headache. I didn't feel emotional, but I really didn't feel much of anything at all. But I was like, okay, let's get going. So I had noticed that they hadn't dumped the trash from the kitchen earlier. So that was my first task. And so I go over to the trash can, and I'm about to take the trash out. And what I notice is that there's a brand new box on the top of the trash that says carbon monoxide alarm. And I thought, oh, so that wasn't a smoke alarm. That was carbon monoxide alarm. All right. So I call the guy who I'm renting from, and I said, hey, I don't know if you know about this alarm was going off when I got here, what maybe I should do. And he was like, oh yeah, that was going off in the kitchen. So we just moved it to the living room. I was like, oh, great. Well, now it's going off in the living room too. What should I call the landlord? And he was like, no, don't call the landlord. I'm like, oh, okay. He said, I'll talk to the fire department and just see what protocol is, what you should do when you have a carbon monoxide alarm go off. And I said, okay, well, I'm going to be gone all day, so you take care of that. Let me know what happens. I'll be back tonight. So I go off and do my things. I come back that night, and the door to the apartment is covered with yellow caution tape, stretched out in every direction. I pick my way through the caution tape, and inside the apartment, the kitchen stove has been disassembled and stretched out in multiple pieces throughout the living room and kitchen. So clearly I have to talk to the landlord now. The landlord's name, let's call him Buddy McGreal, because I'm not sure of his possible connections. I did notice, however, that outside my bedroom window was a truck that said McGreal Pole Digging Company. And I don't know what a pole digging company is, but I can tell you that truck never moved once in the 3 months that I had that sublet. So Buddy tells me, hey, what you do, this happens with stoves. They get dirty and they can set off carbon monoxide. You just have to clean it and put it back together. Everything will be fine. So I spent hours scrubbing the parts of the stove in the tub, reassembled it, and he also, after giving me the instruction to clean the stove, reached into his wallet and pulled out a $20 bill and said, "When the gas guy comes, give him this." So I took the $20 bill and I kind of said, "No, I really don't understand. What am I supposed to do?" He's like, "You just give him that when he comes, turn the gas on. He'll turn the gas on." Now, I had a couple problems with this. One was that I had never bribed a utility person before and really didn't know the complexity of what to do that. The second problem I had is he was asking me to bribe the person to turn on the very thing that was trying to kill me. And I actually had the biggest problem with number one. Even though I knew that I could have died that night if I hadn't opened the windows and was not sleeping on a loft bed that was that close to the ceiling, I might not have woken up the next morning. Now, I had thought the lyrics to New York, New York, when it says, "If I can make it there, I'll make it anywhere." I thought that was referring to, making it big. I didn't realize it meant just making it out of bed in the morning. So far, so good. Well, I reassembled the stove, and the utility guy came, and he tested it, and he said, I can't turn the gas back on. And I stood there for a moment. I was like, okay, what am I? And I reached into my pocket, and I pulled out the $20 bill, and I just slowly sort of extended it out to him. And he looked at it, and he looked back at my face, and I felt like I should say something, probably something clever. So I said, "My landlord asked me to give this to you." And he said, "I can't take that." And he walked out. And I felt like I had somehow failed. And it felt kind of hard to breathe. And I wondered, am I going to find a job? Am I going to find a place to live? How long will it be before I feel like I can breathe again? So, I'm looking forward to hearing about those moments tonight. Those moments of held breath and anticipation, and those moments of oxygen feeling deep breaths and the freedom to be. So let's bring up our featured storytellers for Oxygen in reverse order. This gentleman is going to take us to the afterlife, where he starves the fires of hell of oxygen. Please give a welcome to Mark Traylor. And, well, pick your pick, green, orange, or blue. And this woman is so cool and was so right for Story Night that her middle name is Story. Legit. Wendy Story McFarland. And she's going to tell you a story about how the Grand Canyon took her breath away. But first up, we have a very special storyteller who gets his own fanfare, which you probably recognize because this storyteller is going to take us to the dark side and how that encounter gripped him and kept him from his oxygen. Please welcome to the mic our first featured storyteller, Timothy Bryant.
Darth Vader screwed up my 4th birthday party. And a good chunk of my life, too. So I was born in the 1970s. By the looks of it, some of you were there. I can tell by your hair color or the lack of it. But the 1970s, it was a good time, if you remember it. It was a good time. There was lots of great things happening. You had ABBA, you had disco. But of course, you had something more important than all of that. You had George Lucas's masterpiece, Star Wars. 1977, the first movie, really the only Star Wars movie of the 70s, right? Because the other one came out in the 80s and so on and so forth. But the first really great one, which has been known now as Episode 4 and the whole confusing thing, but the first movie was Star Wars, A New Hope. The adventure of Luke Skywalker and Han Solo and Chewbacca and the Wookiee and the droids and everything. I was enamored with Star Wars. You see, my parents, I should pause here. My parents, they're great people. They're amazing people. My dad is a very relaxed kind of guy. He's has almost Lebowski-type qualities about him. He's just very cool, very easygoing. My mom wants you to be happy, and she wants to be the reason for it. She's just this bubbly, loving person. And they just celebrated 47 years of marriage yesterday. Thank you. Because the rest of the story is going to be about how they bad parented me. So thank you for that. So my parents know that my older brother and I, we are just totally enamored with Star Wars. My dad was actually one of the first pirates out there. Back in the 70s, there were the things called the drive-in theaters, right? Where you pull your car into this open lot and there's this huge screen and they're broadcasting the movie and you'd watch it, or at least most people were watching it, I think. And anyways, on the radio, you dial into a radio station to get the audio of the movie. And my dad was smart enough to bring his radio tape recorder with the D batteries in it and record Star Wars. So he brought this home to my brother and I and said, here's Star Wars on audio. And we were like, this is brilliant. So we set up our bedroom all the way into the hallway of like the entire movie. We had makeshift spaceships and all our figurines, and we would spend hours. We'd spend a whole Saturday just setting up the movie and playing it for 90 minutes because we just loved Star Wars. Star Wars was everything to us. So in 1979, it's my 4th birthday party. And for those that know me well, I do, when it's my birthday, it's my day. Can we just agree that, it's your day to be king for a day and you just soak it in, and so you're holding court. I was holding court. Even at 4, I was holding court. And I loved the attention. I had everyone there. I had both my grandparents there, of course my parents and my brother. I had aunts and uncles there. I had childhood friends. It was just the most beautiful day in Gladstone, Oregon. I'm out in the backyard and there's just this party happening and everyone's celebrating me. And it's a really joyous occasion. It's a beautiful moment for me. And I'm getting really great gifts, like a 2-foot statue thing of Godzilla that has the flame that comes out of his mouth. And of course, Stretch Armstrong, which didn't really last very long. It was probably a week because the dog got it, and we found out what was really inside of Stretch Armstrong. But the main gifts were, of course, the Star Wars gifts, any figurines or any spaceships or anything like that. And you have to remember, this is the 70s. This wasn't like, today's birthday parties where, everything is fully themed. Like, we had real basic balloons. We didn't have, the plates that had the Chewbacca on it. It was very simple, humble birthday party. And so my parents wanted to kind of up the ante. We're going through the whole thing. We've done the gifts. We've done the pin the tail on the R2-D2. And now we're to the point where it's the cake. And I start hearing the song, Happy Birthday to You. And I'm on my knees, and I kind of like shift around, and I see coming from the house, there's a grouping of people of my family, and they kind of part open, and standing forth, you already know it's Darth Vader, right? You figured that out. So let's just take a moment and review my parents' options, right? We had Luke Skywalker, we had Han Solo, we had Chewbacca. I get that these are like hard costumes to come up with, so, I mean, we could have put Grandpa in Dad's brown robe and call him Obi-Wan Kenobi. Or we could have put the robe on my brother and called him a Jawa. You know, there were so many options. You could have covered my brother in, I don't care, aluminum foil and called him C-3PO. Would have been fine. But instead, they landed on Darth Vader. So here comes Darth Vader, and everyone is just like singing the song, and there's all smiles, and Darth Vader is coming towards me holding my cake with the candles burning. And he's walking slowly towards me. And I am petrified. I shut down. I actually just stopped breathing because this isn't right. You see, being so integrated into Star Wars, I understood what it meant to be good or bad, or what it meant to have a hero or a villain. And my sense of right and wrong in black and white was all tied to this movie. I get it. Like, The Empire Strikes Back got weird because Luke kissed his sister, and then there was the whole I'm your father thing. That's a gray movie, okay? It's the best movie, but it's a gray movie. And if I ruin the ending, that's on you because that movie came out 38 years ago. But back to my birthday party. Darth Vader, cake, I'm frozen. You have to understand, this guy is not just bad, right? He's not Mr. Bad. He's not Dr. Bad. He is so bad you have to come up with a different first name. He's Darth freaking Vader. And I'm scared. People, I'm scared. I'm 4. I don't understand what's going on here. Like, this is a serious moment for me to go, why is Darth Vader at my birthday party? He should be, I mean, everyone should be freaking out right now. Everyone should be just like, it's Darth Vader! But instead they're laughing. And I'm seriously confused. I'm genuinely distraught. I'm scared. I'm so scared. But at the same time, I have this really confusing moment because what's supposed to be a really happy moment is turning out to be a very sad moment and a very scared moment. And the people that I love and the people that I trust are okay with what's happening here, and it's not okay. And I lock up. I can't breathe. I do not blow out my candles. I don't have the oxygen to blow out the candles. And I don't know what to do. I've spent a few years in counseling on this one. And what I've been told is when you're under a very stressful situation, there's a certain part of your brain that takes over. It's called the reptilian brain. And it doesn't really include any kind of rational thought. Your body just takes over, and things like your breathing or your you sweat and your heart rate, just all these decisions are just made for you. And most of the time, you have two options. You can fight or you can flight. But in some cases, there's a third option. And that third option, for me, was to freeze. You see, my belief was if I just stay still and I don't even breathe, that the danger will just go away, that it will just move along like a wild creature, whether it's a saber-toothed tiger or a grizzly bear, will just move along and not even see me. So here I am at my 4th birthday party, hoping that Darth Vader doesn't see me, even though he's presenting me with this cake and the burning candles. And I wish I could say that's the only time in my life that happened, where I froze. And as it turns out, I actually got really good at freezing. There were other traumatic moments in my life where I stepped back into this moment of being frozen. There was a period of about 1.5 years where a friend of a friend, I was at my brother's baseball games, and there was this older kid that was, his brother was on the baseball team, and when there was baseball happening, he and I would just go run and play on the playground. And I would freeze when he would ask me to touch him and for him to touch me, because I didn't know what to do. And I knew that it was wrong. But just like at my 4th birthday party, I would just push those emotions down and not move. I spent more than 20 years in a relationship with someone else, constantly freezing, constantly coming up against conflict and not living it, not living through it or seeing through it. I would just freeze and shut down because I didn't know what to do. And it was about 8 years ago this month, that I found myself in a situation where it was an experiential seminar where I was able to kind of unpack all of this and see what I was doing with my life, see the way that I was stuffing all these emotions down and tucking them away and trying to outrun them, and how that wasn't working for me, and how I could make a different choice. How I could make a choice to breathe, to let the oxygen come through when I'm in a stressful moment. And I still have stressful moments. I have plenty of them. But the difference is right now, I'm finding a way to breathe. I'm finding a way to access the oxygen so that I can think, so I can get outside of that reptilian brain and be rational and respond rather than react. And I still love Star Wars. My son, when he was 4, I said, we're going to do this thing where we're going to watch one Star Wars movie every year on your birthday, because I believe in Star Wars. I believe in everything that it has to offer. So when he was 4 years old, we started out with A New Hope. And when he was 5, we went to Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi and so on and so forth. We worked our way up through all the movies. And after the 6th movie, when he was 10, we were out of movies. But thank Disney for buying Lucasfilms and deciding to put out some more movies. And so every year, for as long as Disney's going to make them, my son and I will have this special connection of Star Wars, where we'll always go on an opening night to a new Star Wars movie every year to just celebrate what it means to have that in our lives. And to breathe, to just breathe. Thank you.
That's fun. Thank you, Timothy. We're gonna bring up the Slammer box, and the way this works is if you have a story that you'd like to share, a 5-minute story on the theme oxygen, you just have to go over to the story booth over there, write your name on a ticket, and then if we draw your name, you can share your story. Now, recently, we have had an issue with people writing someone else's name on a ticket. And although that is very entertaining, it's not really the way we're set up to do this. So let's hope we have original people who wrote their own names tonight. All right. Oh, wait a minute. This isn't a Slammer name. This is a message from our sponsor. You know, it's actually appropriate after hearing that story about Darth Vader. I mean, poor Anakin Skywalker, left weak and unable to breathe by Obi-Wan Kenobi, who chopped him into little bits. That's what we learned later, right? You know, I'm realizing, and I probably shouldn't say this while you're on stage, but it wasn't until I prepped for this transition that I realized that his name is Obi-Wan and not Obi-Wan. I kept wondering, when's Obi-2 gonna come? Anyway, Obi-Wan left Darth Vader weak and unable to breathe. And you could go the route of Darth Vader and be encased in total body armor, or you could try this. Tired of being weak, out of breath, and listless? Body Basics is Boise's premier downtown personal training studio, specializing in helping people move better, get and stay fit, eat healthy, and utilize the wonderful Idaho oxygen they breathe. Enter to win a free month of personal training. You'll be able to visit them in the lobby during intermission and sign up for some prizes. Thank you, Body Basics. All right. Now, for real. By the way, if you would like a little help to feel brave enough to drop your name into our slammer bucket, we do have a Story Story Studio coming up here at Jump on February 9th. And there's a board back there that describes the Story Story Studio. It's a group that gets together and they take stories from your life and help you craft them for the stage or for the campfire or coffee, wherever you want to tell a story. All right, the first person telling a story tonight is, I think, I know the first name. The second name I might butcher. It's either Juan or One. I'm not sure which. No, it's Tom Simenk? Tom Seminole? Tom Simon? Tom's coming up. He's coming up. He knows his name. Oh, and Tom, before you start telling your story, I should also warn you that I am not a medical professional, but tonight, for our oxygen theme, I got a medical device. It's I forgot what it's called, an oxygen oximeter. Wow, we have lots of medical people in the audience, so we're good. So if you're okay with this, I think we're going to have a rule for tonight's slammers that you have to be at least 95% oxygenated in order to share your oxygen story. So come on over here. You don't mind if I share your oxygen level, do you?
Go for it.
All right. In this age of privacy issues, we haven't signed a HEPA agreement.
You can share my data. It's okay.
All right. There are lights moving around right now, and I am happy to share. Wow. I am happy to share that Tom is 98% oxidized.
I work hard at it.
All right. Oh, you have 5 minutes to tell your story. Remember, we're PG-13, so don't say anything shocking that's going to require people to need an oxygen mask. And if you go over, you'll start to hear me wheeze. And then if you're really out of air, then our musicians are going to start to play. Okay, here we go.
This story is about 3 types of fun. And it all takes place in the high mountains where the oxygen is a little bit thinner, and that may inform some of the decisions that were made. My wife and I went on a week-long backpacking and climbing trip last summer in the Wind River Mountains, which is the next range over east from the Tetons. And our first day was amazing. We hiked in along a mountain stream, through a forest, past alpine lakes, and settled into a magical campsite beneath Haystack Mountain, Steeple Peak, and East Temple Peak, 3 of the most beautiful mountains you could find anywhere in the world. And that day was type 1 fun, which is fun in the moment. You're laughing, you're smiling, you're having a great time. And as we settled in to go to bed, there was a little cluster of headlamps in the dark, way up high on one of the peaks, slowly working their way down. And whoever that was at the end of a long day and probably not having type 1 fun. The next morning, we started our climbing off easy on the east ridge of Haystack Peak, which was a short route, well within our abilities, and had the notable aspect of if it's windy anywhere on Earth, it's windy there. And it was also on the north, so it was shady and very cold. And the whole time we were shivering and freezing. The climbing was good, but we were glad to get off the other side into the sun and descend down to our camp for about midday. After that, we were worn out, but decided East Temple Peak looked too good, and it's just a hike to the top, so we went for it. And it's a lot of elevation gain, and it's hard over loose rocks, and a lot of descent to get back. We were tired, and we were sore, and we were hungry, but we made it back just after dark, and looked back at that day and thought that it was really more type 2 fun. And type 2 is it's not really fun in the moment. You're cold, you're hungry, you're tired, but at the end, it was awesome. And you look back and you would do it again. Also that night, there was another little cluster of headlamps working their way down, way up high on another peak. And again, they probably weren't having type 1 fun, but hopefully it was at least type 2. Day 3, we decided to go for the third peak in the basin, which is Steeple, and it's longer, more challenging, and we assumed it would be a full day, so we set off early, and as we started to get near the top, which was not easy, we quickly realized that we were going to be that next little cluster of headlamps working our way down. Fortunately, we made it to the summit before dark, but just barely. We had to put on our headlamps there and started the descent in the dark. And getting off of Steeple Peak is not easy. You can't just walk down. You have to start by rappelling or lowering yourself on ropes in the dark. And that's how we spent about the first 3 hours of our descent. And each time you started lowering over the edge, it would feel like you're going into this black, dark abyss, and you're leaving your partner, and you're hoping that you're going to the right spot and going to be able to make the next rappel or continue your descent safely. And it was stressful, and we were tired. It was a long day, and we made it, but we stayed safe, and we made it down to the second part, which is a long, scree, slope, rocky descent that you trudge down, and then eventually trudge around the lake and way back to camp, and made it between 1 and 2 in the morning. And fortunately, as we collapsed into bed, there was no other little clusters of headlamps making their way down. And as I reflect on that day, it was definitely not type 1 fun, or as fun in the moment. And it wasn't type 2 fun, because I would not choose to do that again. But it was type 3 fun, because I've really enjoyed telling you guys about it.
That was Tom Semink. 98%. Oh. Just as a reference, and while something is happening behind me, I'll call myself a normal person. I can be the benchmark here. Hey, I'm also 98% oxidized, or oxygenated. I definitely did have an oxygen issue, though. A friend of mine was doing the JET program in Japan and asked me to come climb Mount Fuji with him. And I thought, sure. And so I showed up. And what I didn't realize I should have known is everyone starts at Station 5, which is halfway up the mountain. But this friend of mine likes to do things kind of goes all in. So we were starting at the very bottom with rucksacks that were like 50 pounds and everything. I made it, I think, a couple hours up. We'd made it to an abandoned Station 2, which looked like a ghost town from decades ago. And it wasn't until then that I threw up from altitude sickness. So we did pretty good. All right, our next featured storyteller. This is the one. Story middle name. Please welcome Wendy Story McFarland.
I felt small and insignificant and free, standing at the bottom of the Grand Canyon on the riverbanks of the Colorado River. The canyon walls stared back at me. They felt like all of history and all of time to come, looking down at me. My mortality was everywhere, from the sweltering heat to the frigid waters, to monsoons and flash floods that would carry boulders off the canyon walls, landing next to your tent or even your boat. And then, of course, there's the rapids that demanded my life respect. Pretty much all the water on the Grand Canyon is big, and this was a trip I planned for and trained for. My husband made sure that I was in the captain's seat on plenty of big water trips. There are lots of women that do big water. It just so happens on this trip, I was the only one, and I was alone. We had plenty of passengers to ride with me. It's just that no one wanted to. I'd chosen my dad's 16-foot Idaho riverboat. There were bigger boats, some even had motors, that offered security and excitement. We were about halfway through our trip at mile 93 when we found ourselves scouting the rapid Hermit. Hermit is a giant roller coaster type rapid. It's 10 waves, and on the 5th one, you get a little extra excitement. And it's actually got a little more consequence as well. The 5th wave of Hermit was famous for flipping boats much bigger than my own. Little did I know, as I stood there staring down that rapid, I was actually staring down my life, and that the flood of my past was coming for me. You see, I grew up the oldest of two, daughter to an entrepreneur and a school teacher. My parents came from pretty modest means. One grandfather who poached to feed the family, and the other one who taught his kid an honest hustle. When I was about the 3rd grade, my grandpa came to visit from Gooding. I remember his green truck pulling up as he called for me and told me to bring my brother and my little red wagon too. We met him at the back of the truck, and he opened up the hatch, and he dropped down the tailgate, and inside was a bed full of potatoes. This is when I learned what the word gleaning a field meant. And he told me the plan. He said, "You guys are going to sell these to your neighbors." And we did. 10 pounds, $1. I can't imagine who could have possibly turned away 2 little kids and a red wagon full of potatoes. It was the early 1980s, the rise of real estate mogul Donald Trump and motivational speaker Zig Ziglar. My dad was just trying to make his mark in real estate, and so these 2 men were kind of influential. Zig Ziglar had written 2 books that I remember anyway. I'll See You at the Top and Born to Win. Along with these books came a motivational album, a musical album, in fact. And it played through the speakers of our 1982 Oldsmobile Cutlass Supreme as I sat in the back. Don't stare up the steps, step up the stairs. There's room at the top. Your goal is right up there. It's time for your journey. Get ready for the climb, 'cause I'm gonna make it. You're gonna make it. We're gonna make it one step at a time. Thank you, by the way. Thank you. Thank you. I can't even believe I did that. The message that I was the captain of my ship, the master of my destiny, was loud and clear in my childhood. By the time I was in high school, my brother and I owned a lawn mowing business that earned more money than my first job out of college. There was no doubt in my mind that I was going to be steering my life towards the top and that I was born to win. Fast forward, I don't know, like 20 years, to the day my husband and I are meeting with a financial planner, naively saying, "We want to help send our kids to college." He hands us a most laughable plan for the situation. But it didn't really matter because by the time we got back to the car, I had a plan to make our financial dreams come true. I would leave my job in education and join the family business, real estate. It was 2006 and business was looking good. Oh yeah, you guys see this, huh? You know what's coming. Yeah, so being the planner that I was, I made a great exit plan. Yep. It took a year to actually implement it so that everything was safe and secure. And I even had 2 backup plans. Problem was, by the time I made the leap, I landed right in the recession. Yeah, there was no plan that was going to save me now. I tried desperately to get into the salaried workforce, always coming pretty much runner-up. We started paying our mortgage with our home equity line of credit. Yeah, not a sustainable plan, and I know some of you know about this problem. And it was a horrible feeling, really scary. Gotta be honest, I was terrified we were gonna lose our home and be homeless with 3 little kids. 3 little kids, one of them kept getting sick. Never a fatal diagnosis, but never something easy either. My brother paid me a visit to see if I was okay. And I wasn't. I was drowning. So he tells me, grab onto something you can control. So I get my little hustle together, and I do. I start a little business called Mama Can Do It. Insert Rosie Riveter. Yeah, right? So I start sewing purses and I start cleaning people's houses. And I even load my lawnmower and my weed eater into our minivan. And I start mowing lawns again. If only that had been the oxygen I needed. I then found myself shortly after. Well, actually, I had barely resurfaced after this when I found myself on the riverbanks of the Colorado River, scouting Hermit Rapid. I remember as we stood there, we were watching that 5th wave, trying to figure out our line. And we noticed that she would break on the left and the right or the left. And always there was this nice little passage to make it through safely. But every once in a while, and in no particular identifiable pattern, the wave would open up and she would crash from both sides, destroying the path for safe passage. I didn't actually think too much about it, and I felt confident and fine. I'd already been through some pretty big rapids by the time we were there. We went back to the boats, and I picked my line. My entry was good. 1, 2, 3, 4. I slid into the trough, going into the 5th wave, and the nose of my boat kissed the base of the wave, and I felt the power of the 5th wave pull me in. Just then, my eyes scan up to get the full wave in view, and she turns to complete glass. I hadn't even considered the possibility of an unlucky timing. My boat pulled up the face of the wave, and I knew what was coming next. There was no stopping it. I dug my oars in and said quite a few curse words. The nose of the boat reaches the top of the wave, and the crest crashes on both sides over the bow of the boat, swamping it. My boat The left side rises up, and the right side curls under me. I slide from the seat to the rubber and then into the water. It was quiet and dark, and time slowed down considerably. I remember scanning my body and saying, "You're okay, I'm okay." And then my head started to burn, and my lungs were starting to catch fire, and I thought, why am I not coming up? And I realized my boat was on top of me. More burning, more fire, and I think, how much longer can I do this? And then I think, oh my God, is this drowning? Is this it? I die right here with my kids watching? And something snapped. And I remembered what I'd forgotten in the pain. And I lifted up my arms and I started crawling the boat. Eventually, I reached the end of my boat. My head popped up free, and I gasped for air. This time I was on fire, but it was because I was extremely angry. I was so pissed at my boat. I hit her and I pushed her as hard as I could, and she started to float away from me, the current catching her a little bit. And I glared at her, thinking about what could have been. But just then, something further downstream caught my eye. It was my posse, and they were coming for me. My eyes went back to my boat, and I heard my friend Scott's voice saying, "A captain never abandons ship." And I looked at my boat. She was naked side up. There was no denying our new reality. This was where we'd landed. This is what it was. And I decided I wanted her. I took my first stroke and then the next, and I swam to her. By the time I reached her and climbed on top, my posse was there. They helped me push my boat to the side of the river. We got her right side up, and I climbed back into the captain's seat. I grabbed the oars and said a little prayer for the calm waters and the people around me. This was my life, entirely mine. Thank you.
That's her. In the Colorado River at the Hermit. Oh boy. Well, I think it was very brave to share that story, partially because there was a section of it where she spoke about a family member gleaning potatoes at the Simplot World Headquarters. I don't know. Well, we have a message from a real estate person who did make it through the recession. Our season sponsor. It's participatory. Everyone take a deep breath. I didn't say to let it out yet. Now let it out. Feels good, right? A bit of oxygen is refreshing and energizing. The Pettit Group thinks buying or selling your home should have the same effect. It's your next big adventure. Partnering with a team that values people over numbers is a breath of fresh air for our clients. Loving what we do is a breath of fresh air for us. The amazing people behind tonight's show are a breath of fresh air for our hometown. We're proud to sponsor this season of Story Night. Thank you, Pettit Group, for that. All that breathing actually reminds me of one of my favorite openings to a show. It was a Tom Stoppard show at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival called Rough Crossing. And if I remember right, the stage direction, all it says is, at the top of the show, all it says is Tarai stands by the rail. It's set on a balcony of a fancy cruise ship, and that's all it says. Well, this director was brilliant. So he has the character come out to the end of the rail, and he's holding it here, and he just goes, and then he reaches in his pocket and lights a cigarette. That was such a great start of the show. All right, we are going to take our smoke break now. And during the intermission, I think that the Boise Phil Woodwind Quintet is going to be playing all Zig Ziglar songs, which is going to be amazing. Motivational arrangements of Zig Ziglar set for a chamber group. You'll just have to think of the lyrics in your head. Remember to visit both of our sponsors out in the lobby, because there are multiple raffles going on with prizes, and we will have those drawings during the second act. And we'll see you back in about 10 minutes. Thank you.
Cantina? We don't need an A, do we? What? I do Beethoven 4.
Oh yeah, let's do Beethoven 4.
in the first movement of the Redstone.
Still?
Oh, yeah, we
That's
are.
our feature.
What? Not many people were here for the first movie of Beethoven. Want to do the first movie of Beethoven?
I'm okay with that. Yeah. Let me, we still got time. Five after.
Why don't we start at the Allegro and it'll make it a little shorter?
Sure. That's a great idea.
You hear that, Betty?
The Boise Phil Woodwind Quintet. All right, welcome back to Act 2 of Story Story Night. Brave the elements, oxygen. I'll get my featured storytellers back on stage. I see 1, 2, 3. Here they come. All right, to start off our Act 2, we get more chance to breathe and enjoy the music. Our musicians are going to play a featured number. It is not a Zig Ziglar number. I understand it's arranged by a Mr. Still, who, if I have this right, is one of the first African-American classical music arrangers, composers, who is published and distributed, and this is a reimagining of an old American folk song, the Boise Phil Woodwind String Quintet performing I Ride Old Paint. The Boise Phil's Woodwind Quintet. And actually, these musicians are very busy, and they are going to be gone with the wind at this point. And they were, so thank you very much again for being part of Story Night. They're kind of the perfect bridge in terms of our themes. I don't know if you noticed, but our flautist here is playing a gold flute, which was from our last theme, and then Oxygen tonight, and then the brass will be joining us next month for Copper plus Zinc, which is pretty exciting. And they, they send us the very best, too. Most of these individuals are the principal performers for their sections, so that's pretty exciting. I don't know how big the Euphorium section is, but, or the 50. Wow. That's amazing. 0. All right, well, thanks again. Okay, let's bring our slammer box and get a slammer going again. Remember, you have 5 minutes to tell a story on the theme Oxygen. And we'll check how well oxygenated your blood is when you get up here. Oh, we have a lot to choose from tonight. All right. Let's bring up Michelle Russell. Michelle. We want to hear your oxygen story. Oh, she's coming up the center aisle, and then, do I go right or left? I'm going to go left, she's thinking. I should have gone right now, because now I realize I'm coming right up on where the musicians are, and I don't want to get in their way while they're packing up, but it's okay, there's plenty of room, so I'll just go up the stairs over here, and then I can go up to Jody and start my story. Hi.
Hi.
Welcome.
Hi. Is pass an option?
Pass?
Pass.
No,
I'm here. I'm going to do it.
just breathe. There you go.
Did anybody else have very cheap parents when they were growing up? Okay, so good. You'll understand this. One of my earliest memories is my parents having a small argument, they didn't argue often, over whether or not my sister and I were now old enough to share a McDonald's hamburger. And my dad saying, they're 22 cents now, Gail. They don't need 2 hamburgers. And we were thinking to ourselves, like, how much money do you have? So we were pretty hungry. So that was one example. Fast forward a few years later, he's still himself, and we're on a trip to float the Rio Grande River as a family. And I have my little boys in tow, and I'm like, Dad, I'm just gonna put this beach bag in the back of the trunk. He doesn't answer me, so I go and put the beach bag in the back of the trunk, and there's this giant sack full of paper cups back there. It's like a clear plastic bag full of paper cups. And I'm like, I'm just gonna take this and go to the dumpster. And he goes, no! I get a free refill at every one of those places. Yeah, Texaco, Circle K, 7-Eleven, got it all covered. This same man came to visit me when I was living in Hawaii, and he'd just gotten scuba dive certified, and he's like, I want to go scuba diving as much as possible. So I'm like, okay, we could do that. And I call in every favor I have from everybody I know, and we go on some very nice dives. And then he says to me, I still want to go night diving. I'm like, Dad, I'm out of favors. That's expensive. I don't know anybody else that I can ask. And he's like, let's just go to the pier and we'll meet somebody. I'm like, I don't think it works that way. So we do. We do what he wants. We go to the pier and we start walking along. Now, my dad is, at this point, in his 60s. He's wearing deck shoes because that's what you wear when you go to a pier. And he looks pretty silly. He's got a little hat on. And he starts going, ahoy! Ahoy! And but I got another boat. My dad's like, well, look, I was thinking, like, what if we, went with you and we went out in your boat? And the guy's like, well, I got to catch dinner. I'm like, no, this is not happening. My dad's like, great, when are you going to go? He's like, you want to go now? I'm like, no. So I wait at the end of the pier thinking, okay, I have 2 kids. They'll be motherless. This is probably not a good idea. This is a stranger. I'm scared. I think no. And my dad's like, just wait right here. He's getting the boat. I'll get the air tanks. Everything's great. This is awesome. Like, ah. So we're waiting, got air tanks. I hear the noise of a motor. I look over, and I'm not making this up. Around comes the man who looks like the Yeti, and he's in 2 kayaks, duct taped together in the front, duct taped together in the back, and there is no kidding, a lawnmower motor on the back. And he says, get in. I'm like, yeah, no, and then my dad's like, come on. And he gets in the boat, and I'm like, oh gosh, okay, I'm coming. I get in the boat, we go out there, and we're in the dark. Oh, by the way, it's night. It's completely dark. Leave the pier, and you can't see anything. You can't even see your hand in front of your face. It's awful. And then we get in the water. And oh, by the way, before we get in the water, we're like, I'm thinking to myself, because, I'm basic level diver. I know stuff. We need a light. So the man that looks like the Yeti says, I have glow sticks. So we break open these glow sticks and we put them on and we get in the water, stupidest thing. Get in the water, can't see anything. So terrified that I'm like hyperventilating. I'm the dirty air sucking dog. My oxygen meter's going down, 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 down. I'm not gonna have air very long. So I think, okay, I'm never gonna do this again. Let me just look around. So glow stick in hand, I'm like, oh, I saw a crab. I see a fish. And then I feel something like grab on my leg. I'm prepared though. I have a dive knife. I grab it, I spin around, I'm like stabbing, and I drop the knife. And whatever it was swims away. I don't know what it was. I'm like, okay, I'm really scared. I'm gonna swim up to the surface and see where the boat is. Get up there. I don't see anything. I don't see a boat. I don't see the moon. I don't see anything. I'm like so scared. And then I see a flashlight, and I'm like, okay, that's gotta be the way. So I swim towards that, and I'm wheezing and dying and scared. And in the end, everything turns out to be okay, but it was an absolutely petrifying adventure because I was in the boat by myself for a really long time. I swam over there, I found it, I was so scared. I sucked up all my oxygen, and everybody else finally made it back, but it was very scary.
I forgot to test her oxygen level. There we go. It also does your pulse. It's blinking. 98%. Oh, Mark thinks maybe that I'm reading the demo of the sticker that's on top of the... Well, I thought it was turning on. No, look, it's clear. It's clear. It really was 98. I know I said I wasn't a doctor, but come on. Well, that's a good transition, Mark, though, because it's time for me to introduce our final featured storyteller. He applied earlier, and I almost moved him to gold, and we talked about it, and we thought, well, is this, but really his heart was set on oxygen. So here he is tonight, Mr. Mark Traylor.
Hey, everybody. Good evening. I don't know about you, but when I was a kid, my parents used to drag me out every week, kicking and screaming, to Sunday school and church. A lot of you probably had the same experience. I don't know, maybe a lot of you really enjoyed going to Sunday school, but it was really hard for me. It was not my favorite thing. One of the things that was really bad about it is that I had to wear these scratchy, stiff, uncomfortable clothes, and I also had cheap parents who bought me a suit about once every 2 years. And so I was squeezing into these things. It was constricting. My mother would just pull that collar so tight, and then I had to wear the clip-on tie, and it always pinched my neck. I went around all through my youth with a little red dot around here where that clip-on tie had been pinched on. So Sunday school was just not my favorite thing. And it wasn't just the clothing that was constricting and suffocating. It was actually the content. It was what they were telling us in Sunday school that had me suffocating. I remember I had one Sunday school teacher that was just sort of obsessed with the devil. She was always talking about Satan. Satan was everywhere. He was under every rock. He was behind every tree. He was on our shoulders, whispering evil things like in a Bugs Bunny cartoon. I had a conversation with my good friend Larry Vold. We were 8 years old. I said, Larry, I don't know, do you believe all this stuff about Satan? And we talked about it, and we decided that the whole Satan thing is probably like the Santa Claus thing. It's probably just your dad. So, so anyway, the thing is, if you talk a lot about Satan, then inevitably you end up talking a lot about hell. And we learned about hell in Sunday school, not when we were really little, but we got a little bit older, and they wanted to educate us on this very important subject. So I remember one other day in Sunday school, we were a little bit older, and the teacher was teaching a lesson from the felt board. And if you went to Sunday school, you will remember the felt board. It was a big board that was put up on the wall, and it was covered with, felt, hence the name. And you could order from the Sunday school curriculum company these cutouts that would stick on the felt. So it was a really interesting visual aid, a way to tell a story. There were objects and there were people, and you could move them all around. And it just made it a more interesting story than just having the teacher stand up there and drone on and on, kind of like I'm doing right now. So in this particular day in Sunday school, I will never forget because it was so dramatic and so awkward. The teacher was telling the story about the passage in the Bible that says, "Broad is the road and wide is the gate that leads to destruction, and many people will follow that road. But narrow is the path and small is the gate that leads to life, and few people will find it." So she had all the cutouts. There was a big brick road, and she put that up there on the bottom of the felt board. And then, of course, there was the wide gate that went at the end of the brick road. And then there were all these figures, all these people that were put up there. And they looked very happy. They were yucking it up. They were having a great time. Really, I think they had drawn those characters to look like they were inebriated. And there was a whole bunch of them all spread out along the road. But then she took a narrow strip that represented the narrow path, and she put that up at the top of the board. And then there were trees and bushes that went all around the narrow path, so it was kind of hidden and hard to see. And then there was only two little guys up on the narrow path, and they looked much, much less happy than the guys down on the broad road. And of course, a tiny little gate that looks like you just have to squeeze through to get there. And then the big reveal at the end is she took the cutout of heaven, the paradise, she put it up there at the end of the narrow road, and of course it looked like the City of Oz in the movie, and there was gold and there was jewels and clouds, and it was beautiful. But then she took this other cutout of these flames and smoke, this conflagration, and she put that at the end of the broad road there. That's where all those other people were heading. But the thing that happened is that when she put that big fire at the end of the broad road, there was a little girl in our class that started to cry. And we all knew that little girl, and we all knew her story, and we knew that just a few months before, her mother had died. She had died of cancer. We all knew her mother. So we knew that something had affected her horribly here. And the teacher said, "Honey, what's wrong?" And she said, "My friends at school, told me that my mother's in hell because she wasn't a Catholic. And of course she was devastated. And the teacher said, honey, I knew your mother. She was on that narrow path. She is in paradise today. And that, of course, was great and appropriate to say. But then the teacher had to go on. And she said, by the way, all the Catholics are going to hell. So it wasn't just these fun-loving, happy-go-lucky people who didn't care about God. It was also like really devout, really spiritual people who were on the broad road. All the Catholics, and we assumed all the Jews and the Muslims and the Mormons and everybody who wasn't us was on that broad road. And I just thought, wow, it was just incredibly awkward. And reflecting back on that, I guess there's a couple of things that all through my junior high school years, I just was thinking about not just that day, but all that they had taught me about hell. And basically what they believed at my church was that very few people were going to make it to heaven, maybe 5, maybe 10%, which meant that 90%, 85, whatever, most people, most of humanity was going to end up in hell, burning for all eternity, irrevocable, irreversible, irredeemable. That was the amazing grace we were singing about. And it just didn't make sense. And not only that, but what that told me on that day and what I learned at other times is that while we were sitting in there learning that all the Catholics were going to hell, all the Catholic kids were right down the street learning that we were going to hell. And we both assumed that all the Mormons and the Muslims and the Jews were going to hell. And, so it just kind of felt like what they're teaching us is the worst tribal instincts of we're right, you're wrong, we are all goodness and light, you are all darkness and evil. And it just kind of drives a wedge in everything. That hell paradigm just seems to make the whole world a more sectarian, tribal kind of a place. So I kind of had stopped believing in all that stuff. I still went to church because, there was a lot of pretty girls in the youth group, and I did feel a very strong connection with God, and so it kept me going. But I had kind of checked out on all the doctrine and the dogma and the theology. I remember some years later then I had a conversation with a family friend. I'm thinking I was 19 or 20 years old. And I was telling him all my thoughts and feelings about hell, and he surprised me. He surprised me because I knew this was a guy who really loved and respected the Bible. And what he said was, everything they told you about hell was wrong. And I thought this would be the guy who would buy into all that stuff. But he went on to explain to me that the perception, the modern ideas, the widely held beliefs about hell that we have today are more a product of medieval Europe than they are a product actually of the Bible. I mean, for example, the word that we translate as hell is actually, it doesn't reflect at all the medieval nightmare that has come to mean to us. It was all kind of revised during that period. Same thing with stories like the broad and narrow path. And when he talked about this, it kind of lit me up. It was like a breath of fresh air. I'd love to tell you more about these ideas, but Jody has told me in no uncertain terms that we have 12 minutes for this story. And I don't know what happens at the end of the 12 minutes, but I don't want to find out. I have a feeling it puts me on the broad road to destruction. So anyway, but that conversation was pivotal for me, and it just sort of gave new oxygen to my spiritual life. And I became interested in these kind of things. I ended up going to seminary. I ended up becoming a pastor, and for the last 35 years, I have had a ministry career. 25 years ago, I started a church in Southeast Boise, and much to my surprise, it was pretty successful. And it's been a wonderful life, incredibly rewarding, but here's the thing I don't like about being a pastor. At least in my case, when people find out I'm a pastor, they want to put me in a box. It's a box of theology and doctrine and dogma. They assume things about me that aren't true. They assume I believe certain things that I don't believe. They assume I vote a certain way that I don't vote. They stereotype me as something I'm not, so I hate being put in that box. But they really want you in that box because they're in there and they want you in there with them. But it is so hard to breathe in that box. So my mission through the 35 years was to poke holes in that box. Every Sunday, I drilled a new hole in that box because I needed to let in a little light and a little oxygen. But I also knew that poking holes was not enough, and one day I was going to have to open the lid of that box. And I knew that the key to opening the lid on that box was to tell the congregation that I did not believe in medieval hell. And so the day came. I had lined it up. I had a sermon series. I was going to do an 8-week sermon series, but I knew that every week I spoke about it, I would be building my scaffolding a little bit higher. And if they were going to hang me, I wanted the drop to be as short as possible, so I cut it back to 3 weeks. And I told the congregation I didn't believe in medieval hell. And immediately we lost 20% of our congregation and about 80% of our momentum. And that was a really hard time for me. You know, it used to be, if you were a heretic, they would burn you at the stake. Today, if you're a heretic, they stop attending and stop giving and slowly starve you to death. And it was a tough period, and there were times where I thought, man, I wish they just would have burned me at the stake. I mean, it'd be so much quicker. I could do anything for 3 minutes, you know. But you know what it did for our congregation is the same thing that conversation had done for me so many years ago, and that is that it became this breath of fresh air. And it reoxygenated the spiritual life of many people who just felt such a sense of relief, not just for themselves, but for family members and really for all of humanity. And the conversations that resulted made people stronger. And you know, we recovered from that. We recovered from that hell series. And 3 months ago, I was able to retire after 25 years at that church and hand that thing off in pretty good shape to the next generation of leadership. And now, I'm out of the box completely. I have started a new podcast called Christianity Without the Crap, and I am off the leash. So I'm out of the box. You know, the day will come where they have to put me in that final box. And I won't be able to poke holes to get out of that one. But when that day comes, I know I'll be free. Unless, of course, I'm wrong about this whole hell thing. Because if I'm wrong, I'm definitely going. But I sure as hell don't think so. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for letting me tell my story.
That's 5% on the straight and narrow and 95% on the broad? Is that
I'm not
something
sure.
like that?
I don't know. I know which group you're in. No.
Well, I have bad news for about 95% of you. Actually, I have bad news for about 99.5% of you because we're going to draw a raffle name from the Pettit group right now, and only one of you is going to win. And so I think a representative is coming up from yes, here we go. And what you win is really cool. So the Pettit group, each house that they sell, they present the owner with a print from an original piece of art from a Boise artist. And this is the one that they are raffling off tonight. Who is that by?
Rick Friesen.
Oh, I know Rick Friesen.
Yeah, it's called High River.
It's called High River, which may be coming later. So we are going to draw for the lucky winner of High River. I feel it. It's in my fingers. All right. The winner is Terry Cottingham. You're going to paradise. Yay! All right, I think will you meet her right over there? Great. Terry Cottingham's going to Paradise. Now we're going to do another drawing for our next slammer. So let's bring that box of Paradise over here. This box has no holes in it, but it also does not have a lid. So that's pretty good. All right. Thank you, Ken. It's very narrow. 5%. This person's so cool, they only have one name, and it's Paula. Paula, come on up here and tell your story about oxygen. Here she comes. All right. Wait a minute. I gotta get the oximeter. Oximeter. It's a very NPR way to say it, isn't it? Oximeter. Oh, she's ready.
I'm ready.
Here we go. I'm pushing the button. It started at 188, and it's beeping. Heart rate per minute. Oh, we won't look at that. Nothing. 99! All right, Paula, you obviously have a lot of oxygen to share with us, so get going.
Thank you. Hi. I'm going to talk about breathing in a little bit, but it's going to take me a minute to get there, so I hope you'll be patient. My name is Paula Murphy, and I am a chiropractor locally, and I am a single mom of 2 teenage boys. It's great. It's great. I also am the founder and president of Fly Boise, which is Idaho's first and only school for flying trapeze. Right? That's the response. See, now when I tell someone that I run a flying trapeze school, the only appropriate response is, oh, wait, what? Right? If I don't get the wait, what, I know they weren't actually listening. Because it's a unique thing. I'm the only one that's ever done it in Idaho, and now we have a fantastic team, and it's really lovely. We are a nonprofit school, and what we do is we partner with other local nonprofits to bring groups of people who could use a confidence-building experience. So a concrete example of something they thought they could not do and did anyway. So maybe you work with a nonprofit of people, who are struggling with addiction issues or working on getting out of abusive relationships. These are the kind of people that we like to help. In order to fund our nonprofit mission, we have regular classes that are open to the public. Any of you could, no, all of you could come. All of you should come, right? When you come for your class, what you will notice is we have this really large structure. It's 32 feet high, it's got 4 uprights, it's got 2 trapeze bars, one for the flyer, one for the catcher. It has a platform 25 feet off the ground, and it has a big white net underneath it. Okay. When you come for your class, you will wear a safety harness. You will be attached the entire time from the second you step off the ground until you're back on the ground again. Okay? When you're up on the platform, your safety harness has 2 ropes attached to it, and they go up and they come over and they end up in a little rope and they come down in the rope, and I'm at the end of that rope. And my job is, number 1, to keep you safe. And number 2, to teach you a trick. So I'm going to teach you the body positions and the timing so that at the end of the class, if you get that body position and timing, we put a catcher up on the other trapeze. You do your trick over to the catcher, you catch arms with them, you fly with them, and then you come safely down to the net. Okay? That's what a normal class is like. If you decide to come back for more and more classes, they get more and more challenging. We have a never-ending array of tricks that we can teach you. If you get really good and really addicted like I am, eventually you're going to take off those safety lines. Now you're flying on your own. Now there's no one else to save you. Okay? In the process of these, sometimes the beginning classes, sometimes later, sometimes we challenge our comfort zones just a little bit. I fly 7 days a week in the summer, and I am scared every time. Every day, I get scared. So there are a few questions raised by that. Number 1, why do you keep doing this? I don't know, I like the challenge. But number two, how do I manage that fear so that I know that I can do this activity in a safe way? Well, I came up with a little 2-minute, probably, TED Talk on how to manage fear. And it goes like this. Step 1, breathe. Okay? I don't breathe. I do yoga. I don't breathe like yoga people breathe. I just can't manage it, right? To me, breathing is this. I blow out the stress. I blow it all out. I'm standing on a platform. I'm 25 feet off the ground. I'm about to do something I've never done before with no one to save me but me. Blow it out. Step 2, smile. I learned more than 20 years ago in my training as a chiropractor, I read a study that showed that it is physiologically impossible to feel depressed if you're looking up and smiling. So I look up, because that's the direction we're flying. There's nothing good down there. I look up, okay? And I smile. The second study I read showed that you could fake it. It doesn't matter. It still works, okay? So I'm smiling all right. I breathe. I smile. And then I fly. Breathe, smile, fly. I like the mantra so much I tattooed it on my arm. No, you can't see it, because it's flesh tone. It's for me. It's not about you. This is for me. It's there, though. It's there. We put it on our t-shirts this last year. Breathe, smile, fly. Acknowledge the fear. Blow out the stress. Smile. Fake it till you make it. And do it anyway. I use this philosophy when I fly. I use it in my daily life when I want to introduce myself to someone that I don't know, or when I choose to step on a stage in front of several hundred people and tell a story. I hope it helps you too. Thank you.
Well, now I know what's going on if I see a bunch of people smiling and looking up. I'm like, it's okay, it's all right. I also wonder about the coincidence that Paula runs a trapeze school and is also a chiropractor. Just coincidental. It's a good stretch. How tall are the ceilings in her chiropractic office? That's amazing. All right, let's get another slammer up here. I know they're busy. Oh, here comes Kelly. So far, we've had mostly 98s oxygen, and Paula was a 99, probably because she spends so much time up higher. I think there's more oxygen up there, isn't there? Less. Of course there's less. Good grief. You know, that explains why when I joined my sister, when I still lived in New York at sea level, and I'd come to Boise for Christmas and join my sister for the Christmas run, and I thought I was in pretty good shape. I ran all the time along the harbor there, and I joined my sister for this run taking off from Boise High, and we'd head up into the foothills, and I would be like, just 5 minutes into the run, I'd be like, and this is always the Christmas run, and I see Santa Claus run by me, and he's wearing a chimney while he's running. It's because I was higher up and there's less oxygen. Yeah. All right. Here to tell our next oxygen story, a guy who knows where the gases are. Todd Fisher. Oh, he's right here. This is the guy who's been helping me with my pronunciation of the oximeter.
The engineer.
The engineer. The engineer. He is very important that I know that. And also, this is a guy who gets things done. When he comes to the stage, if there's a chair in front of him, he just moves it out of the way. Get it done. That's an engineer.
I've got my cheering crowd out there. I'm here with some Rotary Exchange students, and one of the things we encourage them is to say yes when an opportunity is presented. This one backfired. So you've noticed there's been a lot of stories about bad parenting. Well, mine is also about bad parenting. This one happened when I was a younger fool. My daughter was 2 and my older daughter was 5. And we had just got this cabin up in Placerville. Now, for some of you who have been in Idaho all your lives, you know where Placerville is. And the rest of you, you can think of a baseball diamond with Boise being the home plate, Idaho City being first base, second base being Garden Valley, third being Horseshoe Bend, and home plate, pitcher's mound is Placerville. So we had just bought this cabin. I knew nothing about it. We go up one winter, snowy roads, hard to get up there. There's so much snow at our cabin that you can't plow it out of the way. You have to blow it out of the way. So we get up there, and I look at my garage, and it's got 3 or 4 feet of snow on it. And being an engineer, I'm afraid that's too much snow load for the roof. So I think I'm going to get that snow off that roof. So I remember the previous owner had left this rickety ladder. So my girls are out, they're having a good time in the snow, and I ask them to stand in front of the garage, not on the side of the garage. Bad parenting number 1. So I set the rickety ladder up, and I have my shovel in hand, and I'm climbing up the rickety ladder, and I stop paying attention to my 2 daughters. Bad parenting number 2. I get up on top of the roof, and I take 1 step onto the roof, and both sides go whoosh. I had successfully cleared the snow off the roof. And then I look at my 5-year-old daughter. Where's Hannah? She pulls her thumb out of her mouth, points to the big snowbank I had just created, where there is no oxygen, and I freak out. I take 1 step to get off that roof, lose my balance, slide right down that roof into the snow, and my boot misses her head by 2 inches. I have lost count on how many bad parentings, but maybe 4. I dig like mad. I find her. I pull her up. I think she might have thought it was a carnival ride or something because she was okay. I was a nervous wreck. And so that is my story about oxygen and how important it is to look up and breathe and also not bury your kid in a snowbank.
Well, thank goodness we haven't had a heavy snowfall this year. All the kids are safe. Here comes the Story Slammer box for our last Story Slammer of the night with a story about oxygen. These have been so interesting. All right. And our last storyteller of the night, of course she has a story about oxygen. It's Bean. Here she comes. She's right there. All right. Now, I happen to know that you have a history in the medical field, right? So you
40 years.
40 years. So you am I doing this right? You are. I don't know how you can get it wrong, really. But do you already know your oxygen level? Do you do this like on a regular basis?
No, I don't have one of these.
Oh, you don't even have one? Oh, I
Only
do.
96.
96. But you still made the cut. You just had to be over 95.
For our elevation, 90's good.
90's good.
Yeah.
Okay, I was worried.
All right, hi. Oxygen. Well, I'm a nurse, have been for 40 years, retired for 4 now. And of course, oxygen's a big thing that we do. And one thing that nurses know about oxygen is it's really good for hangovers or if you have a headache. But then it's also, I worked 32 years in the newborn intensive care unit, and oxygen was a big part of that. You probably don't know that Stevie Wonder was a preemie. And at the time when he was a preemie, they didn't have pulse oximeters. Your pulse oximeter, what that shows is your hemoglobin is your transport for your oxygen. It's your buses. So if you're 100% occupied, you're 100% saturated. Well, they didn't have oximeters. They put him in an isolette or an incubator, flooded in 100% oxygen, tried to turn him pink. And that caused him to have ROP, or retinopathy of prematurity, or varicose veins of the eyeballs, and caused his blindness. So since with the advent of pulse oximeters, we had a great ability to wean or give more oxygen as we need to. So working in the NI, I transported for 23 years too. And so we had lots of oxygen dealings with that. One time I was on a transport and got to Nampa. Beautiful little baby, really, really septic. Kept punching my calculator trying to get white cells in her. And she should have about 2,000.